And thank you everybody for joining us today. And I want to say thank you to anybody viewing our video today that we are filming here at Pillsbury Winthrop Shaw Pittman in Washington, D.C. They are our sponsor for our CEO Chat series, and they have been so ever since we were launched 3 years ago. So we have a great deal of gratitude, and it shows their commitment to honoring women who are in the working field, whether it's legal or whatever field they choose to be in. So we thank you for taking time to stop by and watch our video and interview today with Dr. Ludy Green. And it's my pleasure to welcome you, Ludy, and to give you a little bit of background. So as we usually find out, every woman we're privileged to interview is the Wonder Woman. Your story is phenomenal. I know everybody here is going to enjoy hearing it. But before we get started, I want to share with you, you have a piece of paper on your table, and it has, if you tweet or you want to send out any Twitter notes, we have Ludy's and both our Success in the City Twitter handles there, so I encourage you to do so because you'll hear great wisdom, and then I always go back and capture those and say, wow, they were so good. So also I want to let you know you have this here because Ludy will soon be launching the publication of her newest book, which she just found out. Can you say what the title is?
Yes, the name, Pursuing Dreams, Finding Freedom.
So Ludy is the founder and CEO of Second Chance Employment Services, which is a nonprofit organization that helps women and their families who are impacted by domestic abuse and helps them find a path forward to begin to pull their way out into, because economic freedom is a huge part of that story. You're also a cultural ambassador, which was fascinating. We do a pre-interview, and when I discovered that the government, I mean, we're familiar with the term ambassador, and you go to the State Department and you have all these owners' responsibilities, but they also reach back into the United States and find people to represent our country culturally and share the things that are important to us. And so Ludy's going to talk about that. And she also is an entrepreneur, and you have a company called
Woman Power Incorporated.
Woman Power, which is also an employment service. So if you know anybody looking for work, definitely need to be talking, or you're looking to hire, definitely talk to Ludy. So she doesn't have much going on, so I don't know what we're going to talk about. But we'll see if we can find something to talk about. So Ludy, you started, so you understand truly what it is to be an immigrant to the United States. I mean, you come from a very culturally diverse family. So tell us a little bit about your upbringing and how you were raised.
Well, I was raised in South America and then traveled around the world with my family. Then I came to the United States in 1988 when my mother died. She passed away in 1988, and I had the wonderful opportunity to be here thanks to my family, by my mother's side, they are from the United States. So by then I applied to George Washington University and I got accepted. And so I came, and then I found myself with a lot of dreams and opportunities, but at the same time, a lot of challenges. So when I got in, I started searching for a job, the first thing that I wanted to do. And I was very privileged to find a job with a congressman. Bill Aracas from Florida. I was an intern there for several months. Then I also was very privileged to work for the former President Bush father. So working his campaign and with his basically right-hand man. And then at that time, when I was working with these two particular individuals, I had the chance to have a sandwich and lunch at the Longworth building with a friend of mine. She said, oh, let's go and have a sandwich. And I was walking by it, and I love bulletin boards. Bulletin boards is basically the secret of my life. I have found everything through it. From my husband, my church, my roommate, no, it's serious, and my jobs, everything. So I go to this bulletin board, and I was driven to it. And by that time, I was like praying, what am I going to be doing? I need a roommate, I need a church. I need something meaningful to do. I was a few weeks here in America, and I'm like, okay, so I started searching, and without kidding, I still have everything. I found my sister's place was looking for a volunteer for battered women's shelter. At that time, I didn't even know what shelter meant, but I just picked it up. Then I found another part that says Capitol Hill Metropolitan Baptist Church offering this retreat. I found my church, which there later found my husband. and the third thing is I was looking for a roommate, and the roommate was there. She worked for Congressman Wolf. So basically everything I wanted, I found in that bulletin board. And thank God I found it, because I don't know what I could have done.
You know, that is, I don't think I've known anybody who found their husband, their church, their life, everything they're doing, and their passion in a bulletin board. But that really tells you something, doesn't it? There's a bulletin board in life. I think we now do it online, but I think it's great. But they still do, actually. You know, I used to be a political advocate and run all the tunnels and everything I used to come from Texas and do that. So you're right, they're great bulletin boards down there. I was really good at it until I got lost one day under the White House. And I was stopped by security and they asked how I got there. I go, with my southern accent, I said, I have no idea, but I would so appreciate getting out of here. Well, we're so happy to escort you out of here.
But going back to the story, the most important thing was that part of the shelter for battered women, which that was changed my whole life. I come with an international finance background. I never even thought what I was going to be doing is what I'm doing now. So when I got to this shelter, my sister's place, I got a chance. I didn't have yet. So I had a chance to volunteer for the children who they were there when the mothers were taking training programs. So then later on, I remember on Christmas time, I would do makeovers for the moms. And then when I got into my career, I started practicing with the ladies about, interviewing skills, writing resumes. But for most important part, when I realized that women were staying at the shelter, why they were going back to the abusers, and then why they become part of the welfare to work program, I realized that by interviewing by them that it was all because financial dependency. They all tell me the same story. I want to survive. I have, my husband gives me the money I need to eat, school for the children, or whatever they needed, that's why they went back. And then they were coming also back to the shelter. Why? Because again, they were not having a job or a career for themselves. And that's what it opened my mind to think about it. And it took me many, many years to come up with a whole concept and model of second chances. And I said one day, I'm going to call a friend of mine who was part of the Library of Congress. She worked for the CRS, Library of Congress. And she said to me, Ludy, so what do you need this time? I'm like, okay, can you research for me if there's any employment agency in the country for victims of violence? I was sort of hesitant to say, can I do this? Is this real to be a nonprofit? What should I do? So she went and researched, and she said, Ludy, there's nothing like that. But by then, I was already in my career. I was working in, at that time, I was in a company called Smith, Buckland and Associates. And I was their director of recruitment. And I have by then employed several victims of violence. So I have tested sort of like a model that I had in mind. And that's how it happened to be the whole story of the second chances, how it came to be by the inspiration of the shelters, seeing the victims, and finding along my way amazing angels, people who I found in the community who can become part of it.
So I want to kind of step back because I want people to understand how this thread happens, because that's how major, magnificent things can happen in our lives and in the world today. Mm-hmm. So what were you studying when you were in college at GW?
Human resource management. I was getting the master's degree. Mm-hmm.
Why that particular field?
Because, I was at the World Bank at that time, and then I realized, my field wasn't going that far. They were looking for economists, and I'm not in economics, and I did not have really the chance that I was looking into my career then. I said, why not something else? So I went and talked with a professor who became sort of like my counselor, and he said, Ludy, why don't you try, human resources seems like a nice field, and at the same time you will practice English more and all that, you will do your papers. So I said, why not? And I took the risk to do it.
So it's a lot of times it's like kismet and good fortune that helped drive you, but you always seem like you were aware or have presence to be going in a direction that was really mindful for you, and that serving in this way is just such an incredible place to be. And one thing you said was curious is to me, so you could call the Library of Congress and say, hey, I want to know about this, and they will just research it for you?
No, I called my girlfriend. It was a girlfriend of mine she was one of the head people there, and so she
I just didn't want anybody watching the video on here to call them and say, hey, would you do research for me and write a paper?
No.
Oh, that's really, really fascinating. And then you went on to get your doctorate. How did that come about?
Again, I stayed-home mother for a few years. I have a little daughter. Well, right now my daughter is 19 years old, but then when she was little, I stayed home with her for a few years. And my professor, who was my counselor, who put me in the human resource management, he was the head of the program of the human resources at GW then, Dr. Joseph Zeiner. He advised me, he said, Ludy, you are very active. You need to be doing more than just staying at home. Do something else. I know you're involved in the community, but I think getting a doctorate will make a huge difference in your life. And indeed, he gave me that opportunity.
That's wonderful. Mm-hmm. And what did you study, or what was your thesis on when you were studying your doctorate?
It was a comparison between the Peruvian women and the American women, and the advancement of the comparison.
So what did you discover in doing a comparison between Peruvian women and American women?
Basically, one of the things I found that we are much more in advance, in the comparison of that culture at that time. We're talking about many, many years ago. It was 2001 then. And basically, the women in America, we have come so far in a sense of education, advancement in careers, in management levels. Meantime, in other cultures like Peru, they're still behind in time.
So you feel like they're still not caught up to where we
Not
are.
caught up where we are.
So you go around the world. What are the things that people want you when the United States sends you out to places around the world to speak? What do they want you to talk about?
Normally, I present the part of best practices on combating domestic violence and human trafficking. What America uses, what are the systems? For example, the creation of shelters. What are the steps that you take to create a shelter? Mentorship programs that they're very interesting to know. Volunteerism, because that's something, one of the things I really learned, and I feel very successful right now that our organization has so many volunteers, over 500 volunteers nationwide. And that's something, it's a skill that basically now I learned it to have. So now I'm able to share in countries where they don't even know that. They don't give time, and they don't know how to convince people how to really be involved in an organization.
So, and what do you find from people who attend your speeches, the audience? What do they come up and say to you?
Well, many people ask me different questions. We have a very large attendees, which is for me was very interesting when I went to the Middle East, to some of the countries like Syria, even though right now it's in a very bad shape, but at the time, my memories were, there were most of the men attending. There were very few women. And they were very curious about, they said, I like your approach, and they wanted to know my approach very much. So they said, why do you make domestic violence as a family issue? It's not anymore as a feminist, type of issue.
So they think it's a feminist issue, not
Yeah,
a family issue.
because I call it a family issue.
It is a family
And I said, because for me, it is very important, men and women together, because, we have the children, there's the family, and we both will have to combat this disease in society.
So men would be in attendance, and so were they there to challenge you, or were they curious about how we really should be looking at this issue?
They were very curious. They asked a lot of questions. There were many of them very interested in the part of the shelters, because they were government people, many of them that they attend. I had a lot of lawyers too. We had, I remember in that particular country, a lot of students, of law. Then when I went to the NGOs, was another different thing. The NGOs, there's more like women, and you don't really see men. And then you see the clients, you will see the victims in house. And then they will ask me about, ways of how, is there any possibility even to bring the women to America? I mean, that type of questions I have had.
One thing when we had our pre-interview, which was fascinating to me, we talk about human trafficking and sex trafficking. And we think about our country, and we don't think that that's really an issue here. That's, and you think Malaysia, you think of other countries, you think of Russia, those other countries, but you said it actually is an issue here in the United States. Can you share a little bit about what you know about human trafficking in the United States?
Yes, totally is a misconception. Indeed, it's here, human trafficking. I got to learn about it in 2004, where our first client came to Second Chances through a partner organization, what's it called, Sisters Charity? Yes, the Sisters Charity. They refer us a client, and this particular lady was found in Southeast DC. And she came to us, and basically she was moved from, the country was Nigeria, then to Germany, then to Mexico, and ended up somehow from Mexico with a truck. They moved her here to Southeast.
And how old was she when she was originally taken?
Oh, 11.
She was 11 years old.
So at 18 years old is when I got to meet her, and the poor lady, she went through so much. From being a little girl and promised to have education, what she got was basically trained to be, a prostitute. It was very, very hard. And as a little girl, she told me that at 11 years old, they were already these parents of hers, that they were German couple who they promised the world to the grandmother. They were taking her clothes and taking pictures of her and training her for a few years to get used to that type of environment. Very, very saddening and heartbreaking. But then, when we met her in DC, then I learned myself about this particular issue. And beside her, there were so many of those that I wasn't aware. I learned it through the years when several women came through our doors of Second Chances. And basically, they have been brought to the United States by international groups. And they were working in international homes. And they were not even being paid. They were exploited. So that type of clientele they have too. It was it's very, very hard. And we all have to be alert and, keep our eyes open to help those
How would
victims.
you begin? Because I do know if we see it, I understand, and just when preparing for a conversation, that it could be the woman where you go to get your manicure, pedicure, that a woman can actually be sitting there doing your manicure and pedicure, but she's also at night prostituted. How do you begin to even detect? I mean, I'll never, when I read that, I thought, I will never again, and what questions should you ask, and what should we do, and what should we do as citizens, or if we suspect? I mean, is there anything we could do? It's
You know,
disturbing.
well, to me, I think one of the things that's very important, if you start a conversation and you think that this person may be going through this particular issue area, I mean, knowing what organizations are the ones involved with combating the human trafficking. There's so many here. I mean, you find from Polaris Project, Vital Voices, all those groups. I mean, people who can really get hands-on and help the victims.
So name some of them. Vital
You know, like
Voices.
Vital Voices, Polaris Project, Sisters
Polaris
of Charity.
Project, Sisters of Charity.
Oh my gosh, there's so many. Ayuda, Second Chance
Employment.
Employment, yes.
So and in Second Chance Employment, you not only help find work, but you help provide training
Yes.
and experience.
Correct.
And perhaps other resources.
Yes, what we do in Second Chance, we're the only employment agency in the country for domestic violence victims and human trafficking victims. So we provide them the whole sum of employment for them. And we have partnered with 210 job partners, which they are nationwide recognized, and they're organizations like Booz Allen and Hamilton, RN Fox, SunTrust Bank, so a very diverse group of employers. In these particular individuals, I work with the Vice President of Human Resources or the Director of Human Resources, and they're the ones that help us set up the interviews. So we don't not only apply just through the internet, but more so it's one-on-one. We get a connection one-on-one. It's a very comprehensive type of service. But we also provide to these victims, because many of them, they come with other issues like plastic surgery, dentistry, legal services, childcare, transportation. We work this through our partners. And as well, as Cynthia was saying, training programs. So what we do is we get, government contracts, government grants, and then we work with different contractors that they help us, or partners in the community, and we provide like computer training programs, secretarial skills, those type of things for the clients to place them immediately.
What is so amazing to me is through a bulletin board, you found your career path, but your work is so impactful. I mean, it's really, really impactful what you're doing. Can you share some of the stories of success and maybe even failures? Because I know I'm always reluctant. You don't want to paint everything with a brush that this is nirvana and we found a solution and it's going to be the cure-all. But it's really important to share your successes and also the things, because I think there's a trend here also that it's repeated attempts. I mean, it's like, I guess maybe if you're addicted to smoking, you got to try again and again and again before you have success. And I would imagine that maybe breaking that chain of domestic abuse takes time too. So share some of the stories that you can with us.
It does, yeah. Let me remember my first client. That's one that I always think about. She's currently working at the World Bank. Her name is Mary. And she got referred to us by the Carpenter Shelter. She was basically the first client through the Second Chance organization. And the challenges with this particular individual was she had five kids. They were living at this shelter in Alexandria. And she had the education. I mean, she studied to be an administrative assistant. She had the experience. But she got a lot of challenges. One of the things is she wanted to do, again, a job that has to be with customer service, presenting herself publicly. And first of all, the shelter was not providing certain things for her. For example, certain of the kids can be at the shelter taken care of when she was interviewing, but the other kids, because they were older, they couldn't. So that type of issues I would start dealing with at the first time.
So you have to go to an interview, but certain children could be there, but if your other children were older, they couldn't be at the shelter
Correct.
without you.
So
that's
one of the
yeah.
That's one of the conflicts. The second conflict was I started sending her to interviews, and I realized she had like about the third interview, and she didn't have that much success when the woman is amazing. What happened? I realized that the importance of sometimes the presence. People see your presence. She had her teeth knocked off by the abuse. And then she had some scars on the face. So there were things that we need to address. Unfortunately, public presence, and sometimes when you're serving in the public, it may impact companies, and some companies may not be, responding to that. So basically, our board member, Dr. Ronald Perman, was able to help with the scars on the face, and Dr. Ryan, who's the vice chairman of the board, was able to help with the teeth of this particular client. That was our first success story. Of course, lots of challenges for that, because at the beginning she had to work with us in Second Chance until she was on her feet. So she was with us either 6 months or 8 months, I can't recall at this minute. But then after that was fortunately hired, first was by the Marriott and then moved to the World Bank.
What do you do? I would think that there's, we talk about appearance and skills and those kinds of things. What about the internal impact, which is self-esteem? Confidence. I mean, rebuilding somebody's sense, because I think that in my understanding of violence, it's a long period of grooming. You groom somebody to become the victim, and then they become the willing victim, which is not in any way to say I'm complicit. But when we're taught to be complicit, I think that that happens, and somebody tells you you're not have any value, or nobody would want you, or you're ugly, or you deserve to be hit, you know, or you caused my anger. What do you do to help people who are in that situation?
Well, we have partnered with several psychologists in the area and counselors who they basically help us. Because particularly us, you know, we're an employment agency, we are not doing that area. But through that community, going back to that, and through our partners in the community, we have been able to succeed in a sense of, you know, we have used a couple of them. Let me give you an example. For example, Dr. Adamski is a doctor in Georgetown who has been working with us since basically the startup of the organization. And he successfully have helped a few women who were very much impacted by domestic violence, in a sense, emotional, and also their self-esteem. I had this particular woman who had worked, currently, I don't know, she's still on the job, but she was with the Secretary of the Senate. I haven't checked, you know, like she's right now still, but this particular woman was an amazing policy background, years of experience in that area, and when she came to the office, great present and everything, she couldn't see it. She burst in tears and she said, I can't do it, I will not be able to find anything. And I'm like, if I will have that resume, oh my God, where I would be president, I was telling her. And she just totally could not believe it. So I tried to, you know, start finding a doctor, someone that can help us. And this particular doctor was very amazing to her. He had sessions with her. They went through sessions for over a year, and he did it all pro bono. He helped her all pro bono. I have to, you know, praise for that work he did for us. And she worked up to now, I know, about 4 years as the Secretary of the Senate.
Wow. How do you feel about yourself that you've done this? I mean, the work you're doing, you save lives. You save children's lives who will never know what you've done. How does that make you feel?
It's a process of healing. I have a background of domestic violence, so when I was a little girl.
That's tough. That's tough. So, and you were an only child in your family, right? So when you see that, do you think there was a culture that came from the culture?
No, I don't believe it's that. It has to do other things. I think that it has to be more that the power of control. People exert power. It's just human. Humans, we tend to do this type of behavior when we want to exert power and control others. But I don't think it's just necessarily the culture. I thought before it was the culture, but unfortunately now that I'm living in America and seeing totally different things, and now that I go worldwide, I find all type of backgrounds, all type of cultures, everyone going back to the same disease.
So one thing that strikes me, and I really appreciate your candor so much because I know how painful this is. You were the child. You were not the abused victim. You were the child. But I think what it tells us is that when we see an environment where we see domestic abuse, that I don't think parents necessarily recognize the damages it's doing to their children. Do you see that as well?
They don't see it, but it's detrimental. I mean, basically they destroy the way you think about yourself.
As a child?
Yeah, as a child, and it goes on. Unless you get help and be healed, you won't, I mean, it's very,
just a lifetime.
It's a lifetime.
It's a lifetime.
You carry your cross forever, I think.
Do you feel that a child, and I really appreciate your candor, but I think it's so important we have these kind of conversations because we never know. There's always a reason why you're here today for this event, and you may know somebody or see something, or you can lend a hand in some way. What do you do? What should we do to help either people we know who are engaged in that, or remind them that not to do that in front of their children? Or how do you help? What should we do?
You know, something that is very, very important, I think, control our feelings, you know. Sometimes people like scream at children, they think that's normal. They don't understand the impact it goes to a child's heart. Or even when you see that your father is screaming at your mother, that destroys your self-esteem. That makes you feel that you're awkward, or you're not good enough. And you can't grow out of that. It goes inside and deep. And some people get more affected than others. Some people may be stronger. Some people may say, oh, well, why this person is victimized or not. And then another thing I will say, if you have a friend, let them realize, you know, when they're not respected. Respect is key. You don't learn to respect one another, you don't respect yourself. I mean, how can you even be able to be a parent or raise someone? There are many areas that as citizens we have to help others. And I think that be there for a friend, be aware services that are in the community to help women who are victims of violence. We don't deserve to be victimized. Nobody deserves it, at least the children, because I'm more concerned about the kids because they are our future. And if we don't take care of them, what future do we have?
I think it's, you know, one thing, and I learned this a long time ago about divorce, is that, and I think it's really disturbing when you see families go through divorce. It's painful, it's harmful to the children, but it's especially, I think, damaging when one parent besieges the other by demeaning the other parent in front of their children. What you're doing in that case is you are dishonoring your children, not the other parent. You're dishonoring your children because the children are the innocent victims. So you should never, ever include or demean the other parent in front of the children, because they feel, children will personalize that and feel responsibility. And it sounds like this was such a deep, what have you done to manage your pain of what you experienced in observing domestic abuse?
Through creating the organization Second Chances, I think that has been the most wonderful thing I ever done. Every woman that I helped, every child that I helped is helping my background, basically helping my mother, helping myself.
That's beautiful. That really is beautiful, that what you're doing by saving other people is saving yourself. And I think honoring your parents and, you know, and making sure that something as challenging as that. I really admire you for that. That's amazing.
Thank you. And that's so interesting because she's saying, how do you feel about saving all these hundreds of lives? And people keep asking me all that, and I don't see it. You know why? Because every time it goes back to my heart and my mother's. So it's interesting.
It's very, very challenging. I think, but
it humbles you. It humbles you.
It does. And this is a difficult conversation to have. This is not like, let's laugh and giggle about. It's an opportunity really for us as Americans. So what do we do? And I always wonder about this because I think we now are becoming a global world. We're a global economy. We're not just an island. Or what do we do to begin to impact that language beyond our borders? I think that women in America have set a new standard, and whether you call it feminism or whatever you want to do, it's to share that and bring that to other cultures. What can we do to make sure that we're sharing that world, to set the example, to set the table in a way so that we're inclusive for everybody, and so that we're welcoming to women who come to this country, or we're making sure that we're making the world aware? I mean, what should we be doing? Should we be talking to our legislators? What should we do?
Well, basically, talking to your legislators is very key, but I think it's more important women joining forces to each other and helping one another. Not the talk, but just really helping one another. And instead of putting blockages, helping you. Break those blockages, whatever you find the stones on the way, taking those for the younger generations.
Showing the way.
Yes, showing the way to the younger women,
other.
yes.
Yeah, and you know something, I think that when we have this conversation, I feel like we move into male bashing. And I never want to be in that place, because it is the world of equality. It is the world that men are as equally important to us, and it's not blame, you know, and that's one thing we don't really talk about. How did the husband, the male, whatever, that expressed this anger, how did they get there? What happened in their life to create that dynamic that gives a sense that they have ownership, or that they have a right to express anger that way?
You know, I think that everything there are many impacts between, religion has a huge impact, because sometimes certain religions, you know, you can learn even through, you know, our books that, well, the woman has to be submissive to the husband, and the husband has to be, you know, the head of the household, and then you're learning all that language, and sometimes you can take it like literally how it is. And I think those behaviors are learned, but it's not really how life should be. I think that partnerships and working together to improve the life of people in the world is the way to go.
Do you think the world's going to be better if we have more women leaders?
Why not? We're caring and loving, aren't we? And nurturing. So
it seems like the more women who come to stand up and have more leadership roles, it seems that it almost in some cultures causes a negative impact. It's that there seems to be resistance, but do you feel that in time we'll begin to see those barriers break down?
I think it's going to change. I mean, it's going to be changing because I think that men are realizing, you know, the importance of the work of women, that we all together, we make the world much better and the economics better because, you know, of the way that we have been made. I mean, our brains are like, you know, both together we can do everything much better. So I was thinking about that women can help men and improve, you know, the countries and improve our cultures and improve other areas.
Yeah, I think if we can begin to have that conversation and dialogue as partnerships, not as us and them, us against them. If we understand that we were actually built with differences, but that we can harness the power of those differences and have a new vision.
Yes.
Because companies and studies are actually indicating that women who move up into high levels of leadership inside a company actually grow and are more successful and have greater economic opportunities, which I think is really interesting. Do you do any research or studies on any of that, or do you pull any of that in with the work you're doing?
Well, some of the areas that I'm very much involved is the one of women in boards. That's one of my interests, particularly because that's when it shows women, in power and where we are right now. And I was very concerned about finding out the United States and how behind we are in regards to boards and commissions and our involvement in management levels. I mean, we all have great positions, great titles and all that, but the percentage in comparison with other countries like Norwegians and other, Switzerland or other countries around the world, I mean, we're very, very low. And I think that presence needs to be more impacted. And I think more groups should be getting more involved and putting the word out there and helping us move forward.
So you feel like there's still this huge
We're very behind.
and
very
for women
concerned.
serving on public boards.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think
Corporate
women,
boards,
yes,
yes.
women serve lots and lots and lots on nonprofits, but
Yes.
we don't serve enough on corporate boards. We need to change that.
Correct, because in America it's surprising. I mean, when I started doing my research about it and finding that, it was really disturbing, to be honest.
So when you go out and the State Department calls you in and says, we want you to go, well, tell us about how you got that job, number one, because it's a job I had never heard of. I guess it's very reasonable, but I never knew that. How did you get that first job? How did the phone call come and say, we want you to work with the State Department and go around the world?
Well, it's really funny because I have got those appointments through all my life now since I'm here in America and serving the community. I think they're honorary titles that they give you. I have served, before I served for President Bush, I was under the Attorney General as Advisory Council on Domestic Violence Against Women. And this one came after that. After that finished, I got an email. It was basically inviting me to be this delegate to go to Syria and Jordan. And that's how the whole startup was. And then they call you, and then you talk about it, and they know your expertise. They know everything about you, and then you're just get invited. They do your security clearance, and then you're sent.
Do people ever get surprised when you show up and say, I'm from America with your accent?
You know what? No one has asked me anything like that. I don't think they can tell because they're also, they speak other languages.
Well, when I got here, I used to speak a real big drawl, and people could tell I wasn't from here. So that's interesting.
I have never been asked that when I was overseas. No, never.
Really?
Not even once.
Interesting. I would think, yeah, that's really, really interesting. But what other languages do you speak?
Well, I speak Spanish, French, Portuguese, Italian, German. And
So-
other languages. I love the world, and I love language, and I love people, so.